Meet Robert the doll, a little boy in his sailor suit, face full of nicks and scars, and kept under lock and key in a glass case in the basement of East Martello Museum in Florida. At first glance, he may look like an ordinary children's doll, but Robert is actually the most haunted doll in the world. He has been known to cause accidents, broken bones, job losses, divorces, and a cornucopia of other misfortunes only because people failed to respect him properly. It is said that people usually ask Robert for his permission before clicking his picture.
So we're going to take a picture of Robert, and if he doesn't like you, he ruins your camera. So let's see what we can do. Robert, we're going to take another picture of you. Is that okay? Okay.
According to legend, the doll has supernatural abilities that allow it to move, change its facial expressions, and make giggling sounds. There is video proof of Robert moving his head and even blinking. When Robert was put on exhibit in the museum, cameras and electronic devices malfunctioned in his presence. The museum staff reports that every day, Robert receives several letters from people who suffered misfortune because they had insulted Robert. Now you may think this is all crazy made up talk, but there is a story behind all of this. The doll originally belonged to Robert Eugene Otto. Robert Eugene Otto's parents always called him Gene, so they gave the doll his first name, Robert. With the arrival of Robert in the house, strange things started happening. Gene's parents often heard him talking to the doll. At first they assumed that their son was simply answering himself in a changed voice, but later claimed to believe that the doll was actually speaking. Neighbors claimed to have seen Robert moving from window to window when the family was out. The Ottos claimed to hear the doll giggle and swore that they caught glimpses of the doll running about the house. Gene went on to become a prominent artist, and Robert was left alone, locked in the attic of the house, waiting to be discovered by someone else. After Gene's death in 1974, new owners converted the building into a bed and breakfast and claimed to have heard Robert moving around at night. Tenants heard footsteps in the attic room above them. Finally, in 1994, Robert was donated to the East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida, where the employees say that he is still up to his old tricks till date, moving his head when no one's looking and even blinking. Robert is believed to have inspired the infamous killer doll Chucky in the film Child's Play. So do you guys plan on visiting Robert and seeing him in person? If yes, then good for you, cause me personally, I ain't going anywhere near such a thing.
In 1972, Kerry Walton returned to his Australian hometown for his grandmother's funeral. During that time, he decided to face a childhood fear by visiting an abandoned building that had scared him for many years. He decided to crawl under the floorboards in the building, hoping to find some old antiques for his collectibles business. While exploring it with a flashlight, the light hit something sinister. It looked like a face. Mr. Walton thought that it was a corpse and got very afraid. But then he realized that it was just a doll. After Walton found the doll, the dilapidated house was suddenly pulled down and was demolished after standing for over 100 years. Walton feels as if the doll knew what was going to happen, so it directed his actions to take it out of there. After finding it, he put the doll in the trunk of his car and drove towards home. Kerry claims that as he drove along, he could hear something thumping about back in the trunk, as if there was someone in there trying to get out. Even more startling was when he says that he could distinctively hear a voice howl, "Let me out!" The next shock came when Walton arrived home and his normally quiet dog turned savage the moment he saw the doll. Even his own relatives told him that they felt repulsed by the figurine. "The way its eyes are on you all the time," one of them stated. Walton's children played with the doll during the day, but when it was left in their room one night, they woke up screaming and he was forced to store the doll beneath the house inside a suitcase. And for nearly 5 years, that's where the doll remained, until Walton decided to take it to a museum in Sydney. According to experts, the doll was made about 200 years ago by a Romanian gypsy for his son who had drowned. The gypsies believed in spirit transference, and dolls would act as a new home for the dead. The doll has real human hair, and underneath the scalp is a likeness of a human brain. He was given the name Lera or Lera due to his European gypsy heritage, or because the doll occasionally screams, "Let me out." The history of the doll grew when several psychics provided more information about its background. A doll maker had carved this particular doll in the likeness of his young son, with exaggerations to the features, as all marionettes should have. His son had died by drowning at the age of 6. Dolls were strongly believed to be able to harbor a human soul after death, providing it with a new worldly home. His father, overcome with grief, fashioned a life-size figurine in readiness for the ceremony of soul transference. The doll still contains the soul of the little boy. It is not malicious or dark, but rather just that of a child who is confused and frightened. Learning the age and rarity of the object, Walton thought that it might generate a good price, and he advertised the doll for sale. When he received a generous offer, he loaded the doll into his vehicle in the rain and set out for the buyer's residence. But upon arriving, he couldn't get out of the car. Walton could not remove the doll from the car. It was glued to the seat. No matter how hard he tried to move it, he could not do it. Carrie was also told by a psychic that he will never be able to part with the doll ever. Nothing evil has been reported surrounding this doll in recent years. In fact, after finding the doll, Walton's luck changed for the better and his collectibles business began to boom. Still, some quirks surrounded Letta. It will rain whenever he's taken outside, and hanging pictures may fall off the wall when he enters a room. Dogs bark and attempt to attack whenever they're near Letta, and people have said that they feel inexplicably afraid and sad when they see him. Letta is also supposedly capable of moving on his own, changing positions when seated. Letta currently tours around Australia with Walton, sitting on the laps of those who are brave enough to take a picture with the grinning figurine. The doll, till date, remains in Kerry Walton's possession. Although still quite spooky, Kerry has gotten used to Letta and will never let it go for the fear of the misfortune that has been predicted by many psychics, should he ever do so. In 2003, a man visiting a flea market spotted an old man with an antique-looking male doll. The doll's name was Harold. Intrigued by his appearance, the man insisted on buying Harold. The old man was very reluctant, but eventually sold the doll for $20. As the new owner of Harold walked away, the old man chased after him, saying he had to explain the history of the doll first. The old man claimed that the doll was given to his own son as a gift, and that the boy died shortly afterwards. The man left Harold in his son's room after his death, and then heard singing and laughter coming from the room, while no living person was in there. The old man also claimed that he tried burning the doll, but it wouldn't burn. Harold's new owner took the doll anyway, only to start having severe migraines only 2 days later. His cat also died, and he started hearing voices and laughter, just like the old man claimed. The man started up a website in which he details all the strange things that have happened to him ever since he brought Harold home. Harold is now locked in a suitcase. It's better to be safe than sorry. It all started in Japan in the year 1918, when a 17-year-old boy, Eikichi Suzuki, bought a traditional Japanese doll for his 2-year-old sister, Okiku. It's said that his sister loved the doll very much, so much that she took it everywhere with her, and even slept with it every night. The doll quickly became Okiku's favorite toy, and it would seem even her best friend. Okiku played with her doll every day, and soon gave it the same name as herself, Okiku the doll. The doll would never be out of Okiku's sight. It had an okappa hairstyle, common in traditional Japanese dolls. The hair is cropped at around jawline length and has a short fringe over the forehead. Unfortunately, in 1919, tragedy struck. Okiku passed away after a severe fever. She was only 3 years old. The doll was supposed to be buried along with her, but due to some unforeseen circumstance, it was never placed with Okiku in her final resting place. The girl's family kept the doll their daughter loved so much and placed it in a small shrine for remembrance. One day, they noticed something very unusual. The doll, which had an okappa hairstyle, now had noticeably longer hair, and this could only be possible if the doll actually started to grow hair. This was taken as a sign that the doll was possessed by the girl's restless spirit, since she could not take her favorite doll with her to the afterlife. In 1938, the family moved out of Hokkaido, but they did not wish to take the doll with them. So, they entrusted it to the monks at Manenji Temple and shared with them its creepy secret. Okiku has been residing at the temple ever since, and people often come to see its legendary human hair for themselves, but they are not allowed to photograph it. It's said that even a scientific examination of Okiku confirmed that the hair was that of a human child. The doll displayed at the temple has hair down to its knees, and it supposedly continues to grow even after periodical trims. Who would be brave enough to give Okiku a haircut? Apparently, a priest of the temple had a dream conveying that this was the doll's wish, and generally, what haunted dolls want, haunted dolls get. Nobody has been able to explain why the doll's hair keeps growing. Even more ludicrous is the claim that if you get close enough to Okiku and look into its half-open mouth, you can see its growing teeth. Okiku's story has inspired numerous novels, films, and traditional kabuki plays, some of which have added even creepier elements like the doll giggling, wailing, or even moving around. So if you're ever on Japan's Hokkaido Island and want to meet a haunted doll with beady black eyes, head over to Manenji Temple to meet Okiku, the famous haunted doll of Hokkaido.
In 1970, a woman purchased an antique Raggedy Ann doll from a hobby store for her daughter Donna, who at the time was a nursing student in college and resided in a tiny apartment with her roommate Angie. Donna happily brought the doll into her apartment, and once there, the doll was tossed on the bed and quickly forgotten about. In the beginning, the girls ignored the small signs that something was wrong with the doll. From time to time, Donna would notice that the doll seemed to have changed positions slightly, but didn't seem to care much. As the weeks passed, however, the doll's movements became more troubling, and both Donna and Angie became genuinely alarmed when they returned home to find the rag doll standing straight and leaning against a chair in the dining room as if it had frozen mid-step when it heard the door open. At times, Donna would leave the doll on the bed only to find that it had mysteriously moved to the living room and was now sitting on the couch with its arms and legs crossed. The girls, becoming more and more disturbed by the strange turn of events, decided to confide in a male friend named Lou. Lou claimed that he realized that something about the doll was evil the moment he laid eyes on it, but the girls rejected his claim and said that they didn't believe in that sort of thing. But soon, Annabelle's actions got even weirder. Random, curious notes began to appear around the apartment. Donna and Angie would find strips of parchment paper upon which words like "help us" or "help Lou" would be scrawled in a conspicuously childlike fashion. But the nightmare didn't end there. One night, Donna returned home to find Annabelle in her bed with blood on her hands. The blood, or some sort of red liquid, seemed to be coming from the doll itself. Donna finally agreed to bring in a medium who could talk to spirits. The medium sat with the doll and told the girls that long before the apartment complex had been built, there had been a field on that property. A 7-year-old girl named Annabelle Higgins had been found dead in that field. Her spirit remained, and when the doll came into the house, the girl latched onto it. She found Donna and Angie to be trustworthy. She just wanted to be safe with them. The girls, being compassionate nurses, were ready to accept Annabelle as their friend, but Lou warned them otherwise. They refused his request, feeling that getting rid of the doll would be the equivalent of abandoning a child. And even though Annabelle was not removed from the house, it seemed apparent that she was not pleased by Lou's interference. All of a sudden, Lou started having bad dreams. Dreams where Annabelle was in his bed, climbing up his leg as he lay frozen, sliding up his chest to his neck, and closing her stuffed hands around his throat, choking him out. He awoke the next morning, certain that it wasn't a dream. Lou was determined to rid himself of that doll and the spirit that possessed it. At this point, Donna decided to seek expert help. She tried to contact a member of the church, but a local priest quickly referred her to the Warrens. Ed and Lorraine Warren were renowned investigators who quickly conducted an investigation and decided that the doll was not attached to the spirit of a little girl at all. According to them, a girl named Annabelle never existed.
That doll is haunted and evil. We had a case made for her so that nobody could touch it. I knew something really bad here is happening.
It's coming after my soul because I'm the weakest.
The evil needs a body to go into, and if you're vulnerable, it's going to be you.
After completing the interview, inspecting the ragdoll, the Warrens came to a startling conclusion that it was not a ghost that they were dealing with.
The woman had told them, the medium, that there was a spirit of a 6-year-old child in the doll by the name of Annabelle, who had been killed outside of their apartment house in an automobile accident. Well, there was such a child, but God does not allow a child spirit to go into a doll. This was a devil, a demon, inside the doll, which was impersonating the spirit of a child.
The Warrens went on to insist that following Lou's attack, the demon's next move would be to exit the doll and enter one of them for the purpose of complete human possession, followed almost inevitably by murder. A priest was called into the apartment along with the Warrens, and it was discovered that Annabelle's main goal was to take possession of Donna's soul. The priest eventually exorcised the apartment, and the Warrens took Annabelle away with them. They both agreed that it would be best to drive home on the back roads, worrying that if they drove on the main highways, Annabelle would find a way to cause an accident. Even on the way home, the Warrens claimed that the demon became hateful and angry. They almost got into multiple accidents. The brakes and power steering failed, and their car completely stalled out. It was finally when Ed Warren splashed the doll with holy water that things quieted down. Annabelle is still around today, residing in the locked glass case that the Warrens built to keep her from getting free and roaming around their house. There is a warning sign on the case saying, "Do not touch," as well as a cross. Some say that they see Annabelle moving around the case till this day, waiting to get free. Arguably, the most disturbing tale associated with this malicious ragdoll involves a young couple who were touring the museum with Ed as a guide. After Ed had explained the background story of Annabelle, the young man, trying to impress his girlfriend, pounded on the glass case and challenged the doll to rise up and scratch him. According to his girlfriend, just after they left the museum, they were laughing about the silly stories surrounding the doll when the man abruptly lost control of his motorcycle and crashed into a tree. While many skeptics would insist that this was nothing more than a sorrowful coincidence, the Warrens were convinced that they had incurred the wrath of Annabelle. But as always, my dear viewers, what do you believe? Do you believe that Annabelle's spirit actually exists? Let me know in the comment section down below.